The Rolls-Royce Phantom glided through Pioneer Square like a panther through lamplight. Midnight blue paint caught the February drizzle, turned it to diamonds. Inside, Thaddeus Remington Cole adjusted the Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime on his wrist, one of 7 in existence, worth more than most Seattle homes, and watched the city he'd abandoned 14 months ago roll past tinted windows. Beside him, Addison Elizabeth Ashford, 9 years old in custom Oscar de la Renta, pressed her nose to glass. "Uncle Thad, is the mean lady going to be there?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Thad's jaw tightened, released. "Yes, sweetheart, she'll be there. Mom said she left you because she thought you were poor. Your mother talks too much. But you're not poor, you're super rich, so she's..." "Misinformed," Thad cut in, voice firm but gentle. "We say misinformed, not the other word." Addison considered this, then shrugged with the brutal honesty only children possess. "She's misinformed stupid." From the front seat, Nathaniel Augustus Gray, 65 years of silver-haired New England gravitas, wrapped in Loro Piana cashmere, suppressed what might have been a smile. The driver, Jameson Aldridge, kept his eyes on rain-slick streets. Thad looked out the window as they passed the Columbia Tower, where 425 guests were gathering 76 floors above sea level. Champagne glasses already half empty, whispers already starting. 20 minutes from now, Victoria Sinclair Hastings would see her ex-husband for the first time since she'd signed divorce papers in a diner booth. 20 minutes from now, the woman who'd left him for being a deadweight, nobody would discover he was worth $1.3 billion. But to understand how a 28-year-old billionaire ended up working minimum wage at Morrison's Diner for 5 years, you had to rewind. 14 months, back to when the snow fell on Pike Street and a man stood shivering at a bus stop with $67 in his checking account and a marriage dissolving like sugar in rain. 14 months earlier. Seattle, December 2024. The fluorescent lights at Morrison's Diner had been flickering for 3 weeks. Management wouldn't replace them, said the electrical work would cost too much, suggested Thad just ignore the strobe effect that turned every shift into a migraine waiting to happen. He'd learned to ignore a lot of things. The way grease soaked through his apron by hour 2. The drunk customers who called him boy, despite his college degree from University of Washington. The tips jar that never held enough to matter. What he couldn't ignore was the woman in booth 9. Victoria Sinclair Hastings sat with her back straight, posture learned from cotillion classes her mother insisted upon, wearing an Armani suit that cost more than Thad made in 2 months. Next to her, Preston Montgomery Sterling III, heir to Sterling Development Group, cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass, and a Brioni tuxedo that whispered old money in every seam. Thad approached with coffee pot in hand, the cheap ceramic handle warm against his palm. His wedding ring, sterling silver, bought when they were both broke college students, caught the overhead lights. Victoria didn't look at him. "We need the booth, Thaddeus." Not Thad, not honey, Thaddeus like he was a stranger whose name she'd memorized for a test. Preston Sterling lounged with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never worried about rent. "This won't take long, buddy, just business to settle." Thad set down the coffee pot, slid into the booth across from his wife of 5 years. The vinyl seat had a tear along the edge. He'd noticed it 6 months ago, watched it spread like a wound that wouldn't heal. Victoria placed a manila envelope on the table. Legal weight paper, the kind attorneys use when they wanted you to understand this was serious, final, binding. "I want a divorce." Somewhere in the kitchen, someone dropped a plate. The crash echoed like punctuation. Thad's hands found the envelope, fingers moving on autopilot while his brain tried to catch up. Inside, dissolution of marriage paperwork. Washington State, uncontested filing. No alimony, no asset division, not that they had assets to divide. Just $52,000 in credit card debt, accumulated over 5 years of Thad working multiple jobs to pay for Victoria's law school, her bar exam prep courses, her professional wardrobe. Debt she wanted him to assume alone. Generous, Preston murmured, examining his manicured nails. Considering you contributed nothing to the marriage financially. The words hit like fists wrapped in silk. Thad's jaw worked, but no sound emerged. 5 years of double shifts. 5 years of taking the bus so Victoria could drive their one car to internships. 5 years of eating ramen so she could have sushi with law school friends. 5 years of sacrifice that apparently counted as nothing in Preston Sterling's ledger. This debt is from supporting you. Thad's voice came out steady, surprising even himself. Every dollar, law school, bar exams, those suits you needed for interviews. Victoria's expression flickered. Guilt, maybe, or just irritation at being reminded. That was your choice. I never asked you to. You did. Every time you said you couldn't work because you needed to study. Every time you needed another class, another outfit, another, and I'm paying you back. She cut him off like pruning dead branches. I gave you 5 years of marriage. That should be worth something. Preston leaned forward, cologne expensive enough to smell like money. Look, Cole, Victoria's a junior partner now at Morrison & Whitmore, making 6 figures. She's got a future ahead of her. He gestured vaguely at the grease-stained apron, the name tag, the minimum wage existence. You're serving coffee at 11 p.m. on a Thursday. The implication hung in recycled diner air. Some people climb, some people plateau, and Thad had apparently achieved terminal velocity at rock bottom. Why Preston? The question escaped before Thad could stop it. What does he have that I don't? Preston answered, Victoria silent beside him. Money, status, a future that doesn't involve asking if people want fries with that. Thad looked at his wife. Really looked. Searching for the girl he'd met at University of Washington. Both of them broke and idealistic. Studying in library corners because they couldn't afford coffee shop Wi-Fi. Searching for the woman who'd cried happy tears when he proposed in this exact booth 6 years ago, back when Morrison's was their special place, not the site of their dissolution. That woman wasn't here. In her place sat someone who discovered she wanted more than love could provide. Sign the papers, Thaddeus. Victoria's voice held no malice, which somehow made it worse. Malice would mean she still felt something. This was just business. I want to move on. Thad could have ended it right there. One phone call to Nathaniel Gray, the lawyer who'd been waiting in the wings for 5 years. One revelation that the man serving them coffee owned a real estate portfolio worth more than Preston Sterling's trust fund. One truth bomb that would incinerate Victoria's assumptions about success and failure. But he didn't, because 5 years ago, a woman named Kendall Patterson had loved him for 3 months before finding him in bed with his college roommate. Before walking out, she'd said, "You're boring, Thad. I wanted your money, not you." That was after he'd made the mistake of telling her about his inheritance, about Cole Holdings and the empire his grandmother Evelyn had built from nothing. So when he met Victoria, genuine, ambitious Victoria, who worked 3 jobs and studied until dawn, he'd made a different choice. He'd hidden the fortune, worked real jobs, lived in real poverty, all to answer one question. Would she love him without the billions? Now he had his answer. Thad pulled a cheap Bic pen from his apron pocket. Black ink, the kind that's smeared if you weren't careful. He signed his name on every page where the little yellow arrows indicated. Thaddeus Remington Cole. Victoria blinked, clearly expecting more fight. That's it? You've decided what you want. I respect that. Most guys would beg. Preston sounded almost disappointed, like he'd been hoping for a scene. Thad stood, leaving the signed papers on the table between abandoned coffee cups and Preston's untouched water glass. Most guys haven't spent 5 years learning that begging doesn't change who people are. He walked to the back, past the kitchen where line cooks pretended not to watch, to the manager's office where Rick Davidson was doing paperwork and ignoring health code violations. "Rick, I quit." The manager looked up, bushy eyebrows rising. "Middle of shift, Cole? That's—" "I quit," Thad repeated, untied his apron, dropped it on the desk, walked out through the back exit into December snow. No coat, he'd left it inside, but going back felt impossible. No car, they'd never owned one, just Victoria's Honda that she'd driven to this meeting. No home to return to. The apartment lease was in her name, and Preston would be moving in by tomorrow. The bus stop bench wore a thin layer of ice. Thad sat anyway, pulled out his phone with numb fingers, and dialed a number he'd avoided for 5 years. "Nathaniel, it's done." 3 blocks away, inside Morrison's diner, Victoria watched through the window as her ex-husband sat alone in falling snow. Preston's hand found hers on the table. "You made the right choice, babe. That guy was going nowhere." Victoria nodded, agreed, but something in her chest felt wrong, like when you take a turn too fast and your stomach doesn't catch up until later. She pushed the feeling down, focused on Preston's smile, on the life they'd built together. Behind her, the diner manager boxed up Thad's forgotten jacket, found his name tag in the pocket, tossed both in the dumpster out back. The Rolls-Royce materialized like something from a different dimension, too clean, too expensive, too absurdly out of place on Pike Street at 11:30 on a Thursday night. Homeless men huddled in doorways didn't even look up. When you're fighting for survival, you don't waste energy marveling at impossible things. Jameson Aldridge stepped out first, British precision in every movement, and opened an umbrella that probably cost more than the bus stop bench. "Mr. Cole." Thad didn't move immediately. Sat there in thin shirt and work pants, snow melting into his hair, looking at the warm leather interior of a car worth more than most houses. The cognitive dissonance was almost funny. 6 hours ago, he'd been refilling ketchup bottles. Now here was proof that his real life had been waiting patiently for him to return. Nathaniel Gray emerged from the rear passenger side, cashmere coat unbuttoned, wire-rimmed glasses catching streetlight. 65 years old, but moved like someone who'd never questioned whether the world would accommodate him. 5 years, Thaddeus. Not an accusation, just a statement of fact. I told you this experiment would end badly. You were right. Thad's voice came out rough. Cold and heartbreak did that, turned everything raw. She doesn't deserve your grief. Doesn't stop it from existing. Nathaniel extended a gloved hand. Helped Thad to feet that had gone numb somewhere between the diner and the bench. Come, you're freezing. Inside the Rolls-Royce, heated seats felt like luxury and condemnation simultaneously. Thad sank into leather that remembered the shape of his body even after 5 years away. The partition between front and rear seats rose with a whisper, creating privacy. Nathaniel poured cognac from a crystal decanter. Remy Martin, Louis XIII, $4,000 a bottle. The kind of thing Victoria's parents served at dinner parties to guests they wanted to impress. Drink, you're shivering. Thad accepted the glass, let expensive alcohol burn down his throat. She's with Preston Sterling. I know, we've been monitoring. Of course you have. No surprise there, Nathaniel Gray didn't leave anything to chance. Tell me about him. Nathaniel pulled an iPad from a leather attaché case, tapped the screen with practiced efficiency. Preston Montgomery Sterling III, 31 years old, VP of Acquisitions at Sterling Development Group, position acquired through nepotism rather than competence. Track record includes 4 failed projects totaling $73 million in losses. Currently overseeing Cascade Heights Tower, a $1.2 billion luxury development on the waterfront. Let me guess, needs capital, desperately, $425 million to be exact. 9 banks have declined. Construction bids came in 38% over budget. Environmental permits delayed 4 months. Project dies in 6 months without outside investment. Thad watched Seattle slide past tinted windows. The city he'd lived in for 5 years as a nobody, now revealed as the city where he could have been somebody the entire time.
And Victoria?
Quit her junior partnership at Morrison and Whitmore last week. Sterling offered her in-house counsel position at twice the salary. She starts Monday. Nathaniel paused, letting that sink in. She's betting everything on Preston's success. The car turned onto Fifth Avenue, heading toward downtown's glittering towers. Thad caught his reflection in the window, disheveled, underdressed, looking exactly like the failure Preston Sterling had implied. But underneath the costume, the exhaustion, the accumulated grime of 5 years in disguise, he was still Thaddeus Remington Cole. Still the sole heir to Evelyn Remington Cole's empire. Still worth more than Preston Sterling would earn in 3 lifetimes. Take me to the Four Seasons. Nathaniel's expression didn't change, but something in his posture relaxed. The Olympic suite is prepared, has been for 5 years, just in case. You never gave up on me coming back. Your grandmother didn't raise a quitter. I knew you'd finish what you started. They pulled up to the Four Seasons entrance, where doormen in crisp uniforms stood ready. One of them, Marcus, Thad remembered his name from previous days, did a double take that quickly smoothed into professional neutrality, probably wondering why someone who looked homeless was exiting a Rolls-Royce. The Olympic suite occupied the top floor, 3,200 square feet of understated luxury overlooking Elliott Bay. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city like a painting, the Space Needle glowing green, ferries cutting white lines across black water, millions of lights promising millions of lives being lived. Thad stood at those windows, still wearing his Morrison's Diner shirt with someone else's coffee stain on the collar, and felt the full weight of 5 years settle onto his shoulders. 5 years of pretending, 5 years of tests and trials, 5 years that should have proven Victoria loved him for himself, but instead proved she didn't. Sir, Nathaniel appeared with a heavy cream envelope, wax seal unbroken. Your grandmother left this. Instructions were to give it to you when the experiment ended. The seal bore the Remington family crest, a phoenix rising, because Evelyn had always appreciated on-the-nose symbolism. Thad broke it, unfolded paper that cost more per sheet than his hourly wage at the diner. My dearest Thaddeus, if you're reading this, one of 2 things happened. Either you revealed your wealth to save the marriage, which means you failed the test, or the marriage ended and you kept your dignity, which means you passed. I pray it's the latter. Your grandfather Charles was poor when I met him. Dirt poor, the kind that sticks in your teeth and never quite washes away. I had $200 million by age 40, built from a $50,000 inheritance and relentless ambition. I hid it for 2 years while we dated, lived in a shabby apartment, worked as a secretary at my own company, all to answer one question: would he love Evelyn the person or Evelyn the portfolio? He loved the person. When I finally told him the truth, he cried, not from joy at the money, but from hurt that I'd tested him. We fought for a week, but he understood. And we had 42 years of genuine partnership before cancer took him. I want that for you. Not a marriage of convenience, not a trophy wife who sees dollar signs. Real love built on real foundation. Victoria Sinclair Hastings was not that foundation. I'm sorry you had to learn it the hard way, but now you know. Your worth isn't in your bank account. It's in your character. Use the fortune wisely. Build something meaningful. And please, darling boy, don't become bitter. Wealth without love is a prison. I lived alone in that prison for 20 years after Charles died. Don't repeat my mistakes. The Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime is yours now. Your grandfather wore it every day. I've kept it in the vault waiting for you. Wear it proudly. All my love, Grandmother Evelyn. Thad read it twice, then a third time, vision blurring on the final paragraph. Nathaniel appeared with the watch box, white gold in complications, one of 7 in existence, $2.5 million of legacy wrapped around a dead man's love. She died 8 months ago, Nathaniel said quietly, while you were working the warehouse shift at Amazon. I know, you told me. Thad had wanted to fly back for the funeral. Nathaniel had advised against breaking cover. The test wasn't complete yet. Victoria still had choices to make, still had opportunities to prove she valued substance over appearance. She'd chosen appearance. Thad put on his grandfather's watch. The weight felt right, like something clicking into place that had been slightly off-kilter for 5 years. When's the 5 years of playing poor had taught him things the Wharton MBAs on his board would never understand. How to stretch a dollar, how to spot waste, how to value people over pedigree. Now he'd use those lessons to build something his grandmother would be proud of. But first, sleep. Real sleep. In 1,000-thread count sheets instead of Walmart clearance. Sleep without worrying about making rent. About whether Victoria noticed he bought generic instead of name brand. About maintaining the fiction that he was exactly what he appeared to be. Tomorrow he'd be Thaddeus Remington Cole again. Tonight he was just tired. The board meeting started at 7 sharp. Thad had learned from Evelyn that punctuality separated serious people from those who confuse busyness with importance. 11 faces filled the screen of his laptop, each representing decades of real estate experience and collective billions in assets under management. Margaret Elizabeth Worthington, CFO, spoke first. 52 years old, Harvard MBA, formerly J.P. Morgan, now the financial backbone of Cole Holdings. Thaddeus, we're relieved to see you. 5 years is a long absence. 5 years was necessary. Thad sat in the Four Seasons suite, wearing Zegna instead of polyester, looking like he'd never left. I needed to know if my wife loved me or loved what I could provide. And James Randolph Whitmore III, interim CEO, leaned forward on screen. She loved the idea of what I could become, never loved who I actually was. Murmurs of sympathy rippled through the board. These people had seen it all: prenups, postnups, divorces that turned into scorched earth legal battles. Thad's situation was unusual only in execution, not in outcome. Margaret pulled up a presentation. Cole Holdings' current status: $1.347 billion in total assets. Annual revenue: $187 million. 52 properties across 5 cities, 23 in Manhattan, 11 in Boston, 8 in Philadelphia, 6 in Washington, D.C., 4 here in Seattle that you personally acquired before the... She paused, searching for diplomatic phrasing. Before your sabbatical. Say it, Margaret. Before I decided to work at a diner to test my marriage. Yes, that. She smiled slightly. Fourth quarter performance was flat, 0.8% growth. The board played conservative in your absence. Too conservative, Thad said. We're missing opportunities. Whitmore shifted uncomfortably. We didn't want to overextend without chairman approval. I understand, but I'm back now. Thad pulled up his own presentation, one he'd worked on until 3 a.m. I want to expand Pacific Northwest operations. Cole Holdings Seattle division, fully staffed, aggressive acquisition strategy. The board exchanged glances. Robert Kingsley Hastings, no relation to Victoria's family, thank God, spoke up. Seattle's competitive, tech money everywhere, prices inflated. Which is exactly why we go in smart. Mixed income developments. Luxury condos subsidizing affordable housing in the same building. Profit with purpose. Margaret was already running numbers on her tablet. Interesting model. Risk? Lower than you'd think. Seattle desperately needs affordable housing. City government will fast-track permits, offer tax incentives. Meanwhile, luxury units sell to Amazon and Microsoft executives at premium rates. The subsidy becomes an asset, good PR, community goodwill, competitive advantage over developers who only build for the wealthy. And you know the Seattle market because? Whitmore asked. Because I've lived there 5 years, worked 2 minimum wage jobs, talked to actual people instead of reading market reports. I know which neighborhoods are gentrifying, which zoning laws are changing, which politicians are actually serious about affordable housing instead of just talking about it. Silence on the screen as the board absorbed this. Finally, Margaret spoke. There's a project already in play. Cascade Heights Tower. $1.2 billion development. Waterfront location. Award-winning design. Developer is Preston Sterling. Thad's expression didn't change. I'm familiar with Mr. Sterling. He needs $425 million in gap financing. 9 banks have declined. Project dies in 6 months without capital. Margaret paused. I know he's connected to your personal situation, but setting that aside, the fundamentals are solid. If we invest, we'd want 42% equity, board seat, veto power on major expenditures. Preston will hate giving up that much control. Preston doesn't have a choice. We're his only option. Thad considered. Investing in Preston's project would put him in direct conflict with Victoria's new life. She'd bet her career on Sterling succeeding. If Thad controlled 42% of Cascade Heights, he'd effectively own her future. The revenge potential was delicious, also irrelevant. What's the projected ROI? 19 to 23% over 6 years, assuming competent management. And current management? Preston Sterling has never successfully completed a project over 80 million. This is 1.2 billion. He's in over his head. Thad nodded slowly. Then we invest, but we fix the management problem. I'll personally oversee the project. Preston keeps his title, we keep the power. That's bold. Whitmore looked concerned. You'd be working directly with your ex-wife's new fiancé. I'd be making sound business decisions. Personal feelings don't enter the equation. Margaret smiled, genuinely this time, not the corporate version. Your grandmother would be proud. She always said the best revenge is massive success. This isn't revenge, Thad corrected. Revenge implies I'm doing something to them. I'm simply doing what I do. Building value, creating opportunities, executing smart investments. If they happen to realize what they walked away from, that's incidental. The board voted unanimous approval for Seattle expansion and Cascade Heights due diligence. After the call ended, Nathaniel appeared with coffee. You're really going to work with Preston Sterling? I'm going to save his project, take control of it, and demonstrate competent leadership. What he does with that information is his problem. And Victoria? Thad accepted the coffee, stared out at Seattle's skyline. Somewhere in that maze of glass and steel, Victoria was starting her first day as Sterling's in-house counsel. Probably excited, probably planning a future that included corner offices and partnership tracks and everything she thought she wanted. Victoria made her choice. Now she gets to live with it. 3 months later, March 2025, the invitation arrived on heavy cream cardstock, embossed with Sterling Development Group letterhead. Nathaniel brought it to Thad's new office, Columbia Center, 72nd floor, corner suite with views that made even jaded real estate moguls pause. Sterling Development Group cordially invites Cole Holdings to the Cascade Heights Tower groundbreaking ceremony. Join us as we celebrate Seattle's most ambitious development. March 15th, 2025, 7 p.m., Columbia Tower Club. Black tie required. RSVP contact, Victoria Sinclair Hastings, Director of Legal Affairs. Thad held the invitation, feeling the weight of expensive paper. They don't know. Preston's assistant sent invitations to every major investor and developer in Pacific Northwest. Cole Holdings made the list because we're on record as a significant real estate firm. They have no idea you're the chairman. Nathaniel settled into a chair. Victoria personally approved the guest list. So she saw Cole Holdings and she thought it was just another investment group. Probably Chinese or Korean money, given the name. Seattle's full of international capital. Thad set down the invitation, picked up his phone, typed a message to Victoria's number, the one he hadn't deleted despite having no reason to keep it. I'll be attending the groundbreaking, Thad. 3 dots appeared immediately, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, Thad? Why would you attend Preston's event? Business. Cole Holdings is reviewing the Cascade project. Long pause. Then, you work for Cole Holdings? Since when? 10 years. Management position. Another pause, longer this time. Preston will be there. This is his big night. Please don't make it awkward. Thad smiled at the screen. She thought he was some low-level employee trying to network at his ex-wife's new boyfriend's party. The assumption was so perfectly Victoria, unable to imagine that the man who'd mopped diner floors might have hidden depths. I'm there for business, Victoria. Nothing personal. See you the 15th. He left her on red after that. Let her wonder. Let her worry. Let her spend the next 2 weeks trying to figure out how her loser ex-husband landed a job at a billion-dollar investment firm. Meanwhile, Thad had preparations to make. Not revenge preparations. He kept reminding himself of that distinction. Just strategic positioning. If he was going to attend as himself, truly himself, he needed to look the part. The Tom Ford Boutique in downtown Seattle opened early for private appointments. Gregory Ashworth, master tailor, took one look at Thad and started pulling midnight blue fabric. Custom tuxedo, peak lapel, slightly wider than standard. It photographs better. I'm not trying to photograph well. Mr. Cole, with respect, you're a 28-year-old billionaire attending a major social event. You'll photograph whether you try or not. Might as well look good doing it. 3 fittings later, the tuxedo fit like it had been grown rather than sewn. $12,500 of wool and silk and craftsmanship that whispered old money without shouting. Berluti shoes, $3,200, hand-polished until they reflected light like black mirrors. Cartier cufflinks with sapphires because his grandfather had worn sapphires and Thad wanted that connection. The watch, of course, was the Grandmaster chime. $2.5 million on his wrist. Impossible to miss. Impossible to misinterpret. Nathaniel watched the final fitting with approval. You look like yourself again. I look like my costume, just a different one than the diner uniform. No, Nathaniel corrected. The diner was the costume. This is who you've always been. Thad studied his reflection. Same face, same body, completely different presentation. For 5 years, he'd moved through the world like someone apologizing for taking up space. Now he stood straight, shoulders back, chin level. The posture of someone who'd never questioned whether he belonged. I need a +1. I assumed you'd bring Margaret. Professional, respectable, keeps things business-focused. She's married and 52. Optics are weird. Thad pulled out his phone, called his sister. Waverly, I need to borrow Addison for a weekend. His sister, Waverly Remington Cole Ashford, 34 years old and living in Boston with her investment banker husband, laughed. What kind of trouble are you getting into? The kind where I need my adorable niece to make me look like a family man instead of a vindictive ex-husband. Oh God, this is about Victoria. Thad, are you sure? I'm attending a business event. Victoria happens to be there. Addison loves fancy parties. Everyone wins. Waverly sighed, the sound of someone who knew arguing was futile. She's been asking about you constantly. When Uncle Thad's visiting, why Uncle Thad doesn't call more, whether Uncle Thad found a new wife yet. Tell her Uncle Thad is done with wives for a while. I'll put her on a plane the 14th. You're picking her up personally? Personally, Thad confirmed, in the rolls. She's going to lose her mind. She did. When Jameson pulled up to SeaTac arrivals in the Phantom, Addison Elizabeth Ashford, 9 years old with her mother's dark hair and her uncle's blue eyes, squealed loud enough to turn heads. The Oscar de la Renta dress Thad had commissioned turned her into a miniature socialite, complete with professional styling that somehow maintained 9-year-old authenticity. Uncle Thad, this car is huge. It's actually quite modest by Phantom standards. Can we get ice cream? After the party, will the mean lady be there? And just like that, they were back to the present. The Rolls-Royce approaching Columbia Tower, 425 guests waiting 76 floors up, Victoria about to have the shock of her life. Thad adjusted his cufflinks, checked the Grandmaster chime. 7 minutes until arrival. 7 minutes until he stopped being the man Victoria divorced and became the man she never knew existed. Nathaniel turned from the front seat. Last chance to change your mind. I'm not changing my mind. This will destroy her. No, Thad corrected. This will reveal the truth. What she does with that truth is her choice. The car pulled up to the entrance. Valets rushed forward, eyes widening at the phantom. Jameson stepped out first, opened the rear door with practiced precision. Thad emerged into camera flashes and murmured speculation, offered his hand to Addison, who took it with the seriousness of someone executing an important mission. Together they walked toward the elevator, toward the party, toward the moment when Victoria Sinclair Hastings would learn that the biggest mistake of her life was trusting appearances instead of character. The elevator doors closed. Thad caught his reflection in polished brass. For 5 years he'd hidden. For 5 years he'd tested. For 5 years he'd lived a lie to discover someone else's truth. Now it was time for both of them to face what was real. The Columbia Tower Club occupied the 76th floor like a crown on a king's head. All glass and steel and panoramic views of Elliott Bay. String quartet in the corner, champagne fountains catching light, ice sculptures slowly weeping into silver trays. Victoria Sinclair Hastings moved through the space with checklist efficiency, counting chairs, inspecting floral arrangements, making sure every detail aligned with the image Preston wanted to project. Success, competence, control. Never mind that the control was illusory, built on $425 million they didn't have, and a timeline that was bleeding out faster than anyone wanted to admit. Her phone buzzed. Text from Preston. "Where are you? My father just arrived." Victoria's stomach clenched. Harrington, Caldwell, Sterling, 62 years of old Boston money and newer Seattle ambition, had that effect on people, especially his son. Especially when said son was 3 years into a project that should have broken ground 18 months ago. She found them near the windows, father and son locked in conversation that looked pleasant from a distance, but held all the warmth of contract negotiation. Preston's jaw was tight, shoulders rigid beneath Brioni tailoring. Harrington stood with hands clasped behind his back, posture that screamed West Point, even though he'd gone to Yale. Father was just asking about funding commitments. Preston's voice carried too much brightness, the vocal equivalent of walking on ice you hoped was thick enough. Harrington's expression suggested he knew exactly how thin that ice was. "I asked if you'd secured financing." Preston said several parties are very interested. "I'm wondering if very interested translates to signed contracts." "We have strong prospects." Victoria stepped in, legal training kicking in automatically. "Multiple investors reviewing the prospectus. We expect commitments within the month." Within the month. Harrington repeated it like tasting wine that had turned. Construction contracts expire June 30th. Environmental permits expire June 15th. You're cutting it exceptionally close. Preston's hand found Victoria's elbow, grip just tight enough to hurt. "We're managing the timeline, Father. Everything's under control." "Is it?" Not a question. Harrington's gaze swept the room, cataloging guests with the precision of someone who'd spent 40 years reading power dynamics in crowds. "Tell me, which of these 400 people are actually capable of writing a $400 million check?" Silence. The string quartet finished Vivaldi, transitioned into something modern and forgettable. "That's what I thought." Harrington checked his watch. Patek Philippe perpetual calendar, the kind that costs more than luxury cars, and adjusted his cufflinks. "You have until June 30th, Preston. After that, I'm shutting down Cascade Heights and reassigning your portfolio." "You can't." "I absolutely can. It's my company until you prove you can run it." Harrington's expression softened microscopically. This is your test, son. Pass or fail on your own merit. He walked away. Preston stood there, vibrating with rage or fear or both, hands still clamped on Victoria's elbow until she gently extracted herself. He's trying to sabotage me. Victoria chose words carefully. He's protecting the company. From his perspective, I don't give a damn about his perspective. Preston's voice rose enough that nearby guests glanced over. He caught himself, lowered his volume. Sorry, I'm stressed. Tonight has to be perfect. It will be. Victoria smoothed his lapel. A gesture she'd learned calmed him. Cole Holdings confirmed attendance. There's serious money. Plus the mayor's here, Seattle Times business editor, half the tech executives in the city. We make the right impression tonight. Commitments follow. Preston nodded, breathing deliberately. You're right. You're right. I just need to focus. Victoria's phone buzzed again. Event coordinator Madison Fletcher Gray with a question about seating arrangements. She excused herself, moved toward the staging area, and tried to ignore the tight knot in her chest that had been there since Preston's father arrived. Since before that, if she was honest. Since she'd seen Thaddeus Cole's name on the RSVP list and realized her ex-husband was somehow connected to a billion-dollar investment firm. Since she'd texted him and he'd responded with casual confidence that made no sense for someone who'd worked at Morrison's Diner 3 months ago. Management position, he'd said. 10 years at Cole Holdings. The math didn't work. Thad was 28. 10 years ago, he'd been 18, a freshman at University of Washington. They'd met when he was 19, both of them broke college students sharing library tables because the heating was better than their apartments. She'd watched him work 3 jobs to afford textbooks, watched him choose between groceries and bus fare, watched him accept his poverty with quiet dignity that she'd mistaken for lack of ambition. How did someone go from that to management at a firm worth over $1 billion? Miss Hastings? Madison appeared with tablet and concerned expression. Final count is 423 confirmed, 2 pending. Who's pending? Cole Holdings. They confirmed 2 guests but didn't provide names. Madison consulted her notes. And Thaddeus Cole, your ex-husband? He texted he's attending, but that was 3 weeks ago. Haven't heard since. Victoria's throat went dry. If he shows up, seat him away from the head table. Of course, though, Madison hesitated. If he's connected to Cole Holdings, Preston might want him close. Networking purposes. Right, because Preston didn't know. Victoria hadn't mentioned that her ex was somehow affiliated with their top prospect investor. Hadn't mentioned receiving those texts. Hadn't mentioned the creeping dread that maybe, possibly, she'd missed something fundamental about the man she'd divorced. Across the room, her mother Caroline Whitmore Hastings arrived in Alexander McQueen and enough Harry Winston diamonds to fund a small country's GDP. Behind her, Victoria's father Harrison and younger brother Fletcher, both in tuxedos that whispered Savile Row. Caroline's smile was bright, sharp, surgical. Darling, everything looks spectacular. She air-kissed Victoria's cheeks, left lipstick marks that Victoria would have to wipe off later. Harrison nodded approval at the space, the setup, the obvious expense. Fletcher immediately headed for the bar. Preston's father seems pleased, Caroline lied smoothly. Everyone had watched that conversation. Everyone knew Harrington Sterling looked about as pleased as a man facing audit. He's cautious, conservative, but tonight will change that. Victoria heard herself selling the story, wondered when optimism had become indistinguishable from delusion. Harrison flagged a waiter, acquired champagne with the automatic expectation of someone who'd never been refused anything. We ran into the Whitmore Phillips family downstairs. They asked about you, about the wedding plans. Victoria and Preston had gotten engaged on New Year's Eve, romantic, public, witnessed by 200 people at the Seattle Yacht Club. The ring was 3 carats, ethically sourced, expensive enough to make a statement. They'd set a date for September, venue already booked at the Fairmont Olympic. Planning's on track, just waiting for Cascade funding to finalize before we commit to final numbers. Translation: waiting to see if Preston still had a career in 6 months. Caroline's expression flickered. Microscopic concern quickly smoothed away. I'm sure everything will work out beautifully. Preston's very capable. Unlike Thaddeus, the unspoken comparison. Unlike that diner manager you wasted 5 years on. Unlike the dead weight we told you to leave. Victoria excused herself before her mother could continue, found the women's restroom, locked herself in a stall, and breathed deliberately until the tightness in her chest receded to manageable levels. This was supposed to be better. Leaving Thad was supposed to lead to better things. Corner offices and partnership tracks, and men who wore Tom Ford instead of Walmart clearance. Preston offered all of that. Preston fit the life she'd planned since Yale Law School, since she'd decided that love was important, but security was essential. So why did she feel like she'd traded something real for something valuable, and the exchange rate was worse than advertised? Her phone lit up. Text from Fletcher. Sis, you seeing this? Some billionaire just arrived. Victoria stared at the message. Then another came through, this one a photo. Grainy, taken from across the room, but clear enough to show a man in midnight blue tuxedo holding a little girl's hand. The man's profile was partially visible. The watch on his wrist caught light like a small sun. Victoria's hands went numb. She knew that profile, knew it from 5 years of marriage, from mornings watching him shave in their tiny bathroom mirror, from nights when he'd fall asleep on their IKEA couch after double shifts. But this version wore $12,000 of tailoring and stood like someone who'd never questioned whether the world would accommodate him. She dropped her phone. It clattered on tile. When she picked it up, her hands were shaking hard enough that the screen blurred. Another text from Fletcher. Holy shit, I think that's your ex-husband. The room noticed Thaddeus Remington Cole in stages, ripples spreading from his entrance like stones in still water. First the valets outside, eyes widening at the Rolls-Royce Phantom in midnight blue. Then the coat check girl, who took his Loro Piana overcoat and fumbled her words when she saw the Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime. Then Cornelius Bradford Whitmore, 67 years old and old enough to have known Evelyn Remington Cole in her prime, who stopped mid-conversation and stared. Excuse me, young man. Cornelius approached with the careful courtesy of someone addressing potential royalty. That watch, is that Evelyn Cole's Grandmaster chime? Thad adjusted his cuffs, let the watch catch light. It was my grandfather's. She left it to me. Your grandfather, Charles Remington. Understanding dawned across Cornelius's face. Then you're, good God, you're Thaddeus Cole, Evelyn's grandson. Yes, sir. I haven't seen you since you were 15. You've been in New York? Among other places. Nearby conversations paused, heads turned. In the age of smartphones, information spread at the speed of 5G. That's Thaddeus Cole? Who's Thaddeus Cole? Cole Holdings, real estate empire. His grandmother Evelyn. Wait, the Evelyn Cole? The one who built? Exactly. Phones emerged. Discreet Googling commenced. Results appeared. Thaddeus Remington Cole, 28, chairman of Cole Holdings. Estimated net worth, $1.347 billion. Inherited from grandmother Evelyn Remington Cole, legendary developer who built fortune from $50,000 inheritance to over $1 billion. Murmurs intensified. Patricia Drummond Wells, 58 and on the board of 3 major foundations, pushed through the crowd with the determination of someone who knew opportunity when she saw it. Thaddeus, I didn't know you were in Seattle. Opened an office 2 months ago, Columbia Center. You should have called. We're always looking for development partners. She turned to the gathering crowd. Everyone, this is Thaddeus Cole, chairman of Cole Holdings. The crowd pressed closer. Questions multiplied. Business cards materialized. Thad fielded it all with practiced ease, the skills learned from years of charity galas and board meetings, all while Addison held his hand and watched adults behave like seagulls around French fries. Across the room, Preston Montgomery Sterling III noticed the commotion, noticed his guests clustering around someone, noticed his carefully orchestrated event developing an unexpected center of gravity. "Who is that?" he asked his assistant Bryce Wellington, a nervous Yale graduate who lived in perpetual terror of disappointing his boss. Bryce checked his phone, face going pale. "Sir, that's Thaddeus Cole, from Cole Holdings. The firm we invited?" "Finally," Preston started forward. "I've been trying to get a meeting with them for months." "Sir, there's something else." Bryce's voice dropped. "According to Forbes, he's 28 years old." Preston stopped. So Victoria's ex-husband is 28, named Thaddeus Cole. The implications hit like physics. Mass times acceleration equals force. And Preston felt the impact in his chest, his throat, his suddenly oxygen-deprived brain. "Get me everything on Thaddeus Cole. Now." Bryce's fingers flew across his phone. Results appeared. Forbes profile, Wikipedia entry, scattered mentions in business press. Very few photos. The man guarded his privacy like a state secret. But one grainy shot from a charity event 2 years ago. Preston stared at the image, zoomed in, felt his world tilt sideways. Same face, same height, same sandy blonde hair, though styled differently. The man who'd sat in a diner booth 3 months ago signing divorce papers now stood in a Tom Ford tuxedo worth more than Preston's car, wearing a watch that cost more than Preston's annual salary. This can't be right, but it was right. Had to be right, because now Victoria's parents were noticing the crowd, and Harrison Sinclair Hastings IV was pulling out his phone, and Caroline Whitmore Hastings's face was going through color changes like a stoplight malfunction. "Oh my God," Caroline's voice carried. "That's Thaddeus. That's Victoria's ex-husband." Fletcher showed them his phone. Forbes article, net worth, chairman title, everything that made no sense given what they knew, what they'd assumed, what Victoria had told them about her deadbeat ex, who'd worked minimum wage and had no ambition. Harrison stared at the numbers. 1.3 billion. He's worth $1.3 billion. "He worked at a diner," Caroline whispered. "Apparently he owns half of Tribeca." They looked at each other with dawning horror. 5 years of telling Victoria to leave him, 5 years of mocking him at family dinners, of condescending comments about his clothes and his job and his apparent lack of future. 5 years of being completely, catastrophically wrong. "Where's Victoria?" Harrison scanned the room. "She needs to know." But Victoria was still in the bathroom, staring at her phone, at Fletcher's photo, at evidence that the man she'd divorced for having no ambition was actually worth more than Preston's entire family fortune. Her champagne flute slipped, crystals shattered on marble. The sound cut through conversations like a gunshot. Everyone turned. Victoria stood frozen, shards of glass scattered around her feet like evidence of something breaking that couldn't be fixed. And across 40 feet of ballroom floor, Thaddeus Cole looked up. Their eyes met. 5 years of marriage, 5 years of lies, 3 months of separation. Now, truth. The silence lasted 3 heartbeats. Then the room erupted in whispers, phones tilting toward Victoria, capturing her shock for Instagram stories and Twitter threads that would go viral by midnight. Preston materialized at her elbow, hand tight on her arm. "You were married to Thaddeus Cole?" His voice was too loud. People heard. More phones appeared. More documentation of Victoria Sinclair Hastings' catastrophic failure to recognize a billion-dollar opportunity when it was sleeping next to her. "I didn't know." Her voice came out barely audible. "Preston, I swear I didn't." "How could you not know?" Preston was spiraling. She could see it in his eyes. "He's worth more than my father. He's worth more than—" "He worked at Morrison's Diner." Victoria's voice rose to match his. He lived in a 500-square-foot apartment. He rode the bus. Caroline pushed through the crowd, Harrison behind her, both wearing expressions somewhere between horror and damage control. Victoria, sweetheart, we need to talk. Not now, Mother. This is important. I said not now. Thad was walking toward them. People parted automatically, creating a path like Moses in the Red Sea, everyone wanting to witness whatever happened next. Addison still held his hand, looking confused but committed to her role. He stopped 10 feet away, close enough to speak without shouting, far enough to maintain professional distance. Hello, Victoria. 3 words, calm, neutral, devastating in their simplicity. Victoria's brain tried to process, tried to reconcile Thad the diner manager with this man in midnight blue Tom Ford, with the Grandmaster chime on his wrist, with the easy confidence of someone who'd never doubted his worth. Thad, how are you? I'm here for the groundbreaking. Cole Holdings received an invitation. Cole Holdings? You said you work for them. I do. I'm chairman. The words landed like blows. Chairman, not assistant, not mid-level manager, chairman of a firm worth over $1 billion. Preston pushed forward, desperation overriding pride. Mr. Cole, Preston Sterling, I've been trying to reach your office for months. Thad's gaze shifted, took in Preston with the clinical assessment of someone evaluating livestock. Mr. Sterling, I had no idea you'd attend personally. Usually firms send representatives. I make exceptions for projects that interest me. Thad's expression remained neutral. I wanted to see Cascade Heights firsthand before committing capital. Preston's face lit up like Christmas morning. Of course, I have the full presentation ready. We can discuss terms, perhaps later. Right now I need to speak with Victoria. Thad looked back at her. Privately. Wait. Preston's hand shot out, grabbed Thad's sleeve. Expensive fabric bunched under his grip. You two know each other? We were married, 6 years total, 5 years of marriage, 1 year engaged before that. The room inhaled collectively. 423 witnesses to this revelation. 423 phones documenting everything. Preston released Thad's sleeve like it had burned him, turned to Victoria, betrayal and calculation warring across his face. You were married to a billionaire and you never told me? I didn't know. How could you not know your own husband's net worth? Because I hid it. Thad's voice cut through their argument. Deliberately, for 5 years. Everyone stopped, stared. Thad continued, still calm, still measured. I worked those jobs, lived in that apartment. Everything Victoria saw was real. I just omitted mentioning Cole Holdings. Why? Preston looked genuinely baffled. Why would anyone? To see if she'd love me for who I was, not what I had. Thad's gaze returned to Victoria. Turns out she couldn't. The accusation hung in recycled air. Victoria felt it like a physical weight, pressing down on her shoulders, her chest, her ability to breathe. Caroline tried to intervene. Thaddeus, sweetheart, surely you understand. Mrs. Sinclair Hastings. Thad's voice dropped 10 degrees. With respect, this doesn't concern you. I'm Victoria's mother. You're the woman who told her I was dead weight. Thanksgiving 2024. You said, and I quote, "Thank God Victoria came to her senses. That Thaddeus boy was absolute dead weight." Caroline's face went white. I never. You did. I have it recorded. Thad pulled out his phone. Would you like me to play it? Silence. Caroline stepped back, face burning. Harrison looked like he wanted to disappear into the marble floor. Thad pocketed his phone. Victoria, we need to talk. Alone. She nodded mutely. Let him guide her toward a private alcove near the windows, away from the crowd but still visible to everyone. Privacy was relative at events like this. 400 people watching while pretending not to. Preston started to follow. Nathaniel materialized from nowhere, stepped into his path with the polite implacability of a brick wall. Business matter. They'll return shortly. I'm her fiancé, and he's a potential $400 million investor. Which relationship takes priority tonight? Preston hesitated. Calculation 1. He stepped back. The alcove offered views of Elliott Bay, ferries cutting white lines across black water, city lights reflecting like fallen stars. Victoria stood with her back to the glass, arms crossed, defensive posture that Thad recognized from every argument they'd ever had. You lied to me for 5 years. I never lied. I worked those jobs, lived that life. I just didn't tell you about the other life. That's deceptive. Is it? Thad leaned against the wall, casual. You assumed I was poor because I lived modestly. I never confirmed or denied. You drew conclusions based on appearances. You let me believe. I let you see who I actually am when money isn't a factor. Turns out you didn't like that person very much. Victoria flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? You left me for Preston, not because I was cruel or unfaithful, but because he had money and I appeared not to. He has ambition. I have a billion-dollar company I've run since I was 23. What Preston has is a trust fund and nepotism. The cruelty of it was surgical. True, but cutting. Victoria felt tears starting, blinked them back furiously. Why are you doing this? Doing what? Attending a business event? Reviewing an investment opportunity? Existing in public? You're here to humiliate me. Thad's expression softened microscopically. Victoria, if I wanted to humiliate you, I'd have revealed everything while we were still married. Shown up at your parents' house in the Rolls. Introduced you to the board. Made you feel small in front of everyone you wanted to impress. He paused, let that sink in. I didn't. I signed the divorce papers, took the debt you wanted me to take, walked away quietly. All I'm doing tonight is being myself. If that humiliates you, that's not my intention. That's your guilt talking. I don't feel guilty. You should. Now his voice hardened. I gave you 5 years of loyalty, 5 years of support. I paid for your law school, your bar exams, your entire professional wardrobe. I worked 3 jobs so you could study. I rode the bus so you could drive. I ate ramen so you could have sushi with classmates. Victoria's throat closed. She remembered all of it, had justified it at the time as him being supportive, as partnership, as what husbands did. And when you finally made it, when you got that junior partnership and started making 6 figures, you looked at me and decided I wasn't enough anymore, that I'd never become someone, that Preston Sterling's money and status were worth more than my character. Thad, answer honestly. He stepped closer. If I showed up at your apartment tomorrow, in my Morrison's uniform, driving a bus, if I told you I lied about Cole Holdings and I'm actually still poor, would you take me back? Victoria opened her mouth, closed it. The truth was a physical presence in her throat, choking her. Thad nodded slowly. That silence is the answer I needed. He turned to leave. Victoria grabbed his arm, felt expensive fabric under her fingers, remembered all the times she'd felt cheap polyester instead. I made a mistake. People make mistakes. You made a choice. Choices have consequences. We can start over. No, firm, final. You don't want to start over with me. You want to start over with my bank account. That's not true. Prove it. Walk away from Preston. Get a studio apartment in Fremont. Take a public defender job making $40,000 a year. Date me as Thad the nobody and see if you can love that person. Victoria's hand dropped. They both knew she wouldn't, couldn't. Thad's expression held something like sadness. I loved you completely. That's why losing you hurts so much. But love isn't enough without respect. You never respected the man I was. I'm sorry. I know. But sorry doesn't change what happened. Sorry doesn't make you different. He walked away, back toward the crowd, toward Nathaniel and Addison, toward the life he'd built while she'd been busy judging him for not building fast enough. Victoria stood alone in the alcove, expensive dress and borrowed diamonds, and absolutely nothing that mattered, watching her ex-husband return to a party that now orbited him instead of Preston. Across the room, Preston was watching too, watched Thad collect Addison, watched Margaret Elizabeth Worthington, CFO of Cole Holdings, approach with tablets and investment proposals, watched his last hope for Cascade Heights funding gather around a man he'd mocked in a diner booth 3 months ago. Desperation made people stupid. Preston proved this by pushing through the crowd, by raising his voice loud enough that conversation stopped. "You think you can just show up here and steal my investors?" Thad turned, expression perfectly neutral. "I'm not stealing anything, Mr. Sterling. I'm attending an event I was invited to." "Bullshit. You're here because of Victoria, because you want revenge." "I'm here because Cascade Heights is a potentially sound investment. Your personal relationship with my ex-wife is irrelevant." "Then prove it. Commit to funding." The room went completely silent. Even the string quartet stopped playing. Thad considered Preston with the detachment of someone examining a specimen. "You want me to commit $425 million based on a public tantrum? I want you to do business like a professional instead of playing games." "I don't play games, Mr. Sterling." Thad's voice dropped, went cold. "I make calculated investments based on thorough analysis. Your project has potential. Your management does not. If Cole Holdings invests, we'd require 42% equity, board seat, and veto power on all expenditures over $5 million. Preston's face went red. "That's insulting. I'm not giving up control." "Then find another investor." "But we both know you can't. 9 banks have already declined. Every major firm in the Pacific Northwest has passed. Cole Holdings is your last option." "Fuck you." Preston's voice cracked. "Fuck you and your money and your—" "Preston." Harrington Sterling's voice cut through his son's meltdown like a knife. The elder Sterling pushed through the crowd, face carved from granite. "My office. Now." "Dad, he's trying to—" "Now." Father and son locked eyes. Preston broke first, looked away, let his father grip his elbow and march him toward the exit, but not before turning back to Thad one more time. "You know what? Keep your money. I don't need it. I don't need you. I'll find funding elsewhere." Thad said nothing. Just watched Preston leave. Watched the room process what had just happened. Watched Victoria stand frozen in her alcove, looking like someone witnessing a car crash in slow motion. Nathaniel appeared at Thad's elbow. That was definitive. He made his choice. So did you. By refusing to invest, you just guaranteed Cascade Heights fails. "No," Thad adjusted his cufflinks. "By refusing to invest without proper terms, I guarantee that if it fails, it's not my problem." Margaret approached with her tablet. "The other investors heard everything. They're leaving. If Cole Holdings passed, they assume something's wrong." Thad nodded slowly. Watched Preston's carefully orchestrated evening collapse in real time. Watched Victoria's future crumble with it. No satisfaction in his expression. Just tired recognition that some people had to learn expensive lessons. "Nathaniel, call the car. We're done here." "What about—" Nathaniel glanced at Victoria, still frozen in her alcove. "What about her?" Thad collected Addison, who'd watched everything with wide-eyed fascination. "She made her choice 3 months ago. Tonight she's learning what that choice cost." They walked toward the exit. Behind them, the party continued its death spiral. Guests making excuses, investors networking toward the exits, Caroline and Harrison trying to control damage that was already metastasized beyond repair. Victoria watched Thad leave, watched him walk out of her life for the second time, this time taking with him any chance of fixing her catastrophic mistakes. Her phone buzzed. Text from Preston. This is your fault. Your ex destroyed everything. Another buzz. Text from her mother. We need to talk. About Thaddeus. About what we told you. Another. Fletcher. Sis, Twitter is brutal. You might want to stay offline for a while. Victoria turned off her phone, stood in the alcove overlooking Elliott Bay, surrounded by 423 witnesses to her humiliation, wearing a dress that cost more than Thad's monthly diner salary, and felt poverty in ways that had nothing to do with money. Outside, the Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled away from the curb. Inside, Addison looked up at her uncle. Is the mean lady sad now? Thad stared out at Seattle's lights. Probably. Good, she was mean to you. She was confused. There's a difference. Do you still love her? The question landed heavy. Thad considered it honestly. I love who I thought she was. I'm sad that person doesn't exist. That's sad. Yes, it is. They drove through rain-slicked streets toward the Four Seasons, toward temporary safety, toward the complicated aftermath of truths revealed and consequences delivered. Behind them, Cascade Heights Tower died before it was born. Preston Sterling's career evaporated. Victoria's engagement crumbled. The Sinclair Hastings family learned that judging books by covers was an expensive mistake when the book was worth over $1 billion. And Thaddeus Remington Cole learned that revenge was unnecessary when truth did all the work itself. The internet, as it turned out, had no concept of mercy. By midnight Saturday, #billionaire reveal was trending across 3 continents. By Sunday morning, the story had metastasized from Twitter to Reddit to TikTok to mainstream news. Wall Street Journal ran a think piece titled, When Testing Love Becomes Performance Art. Forbes published a retrospective on Evelyn Remington Cole's empire-building philosophy. Entertainment Weekly asked if this was the greatest long con in modern romance. Thad declined every interview request. Let the story burn through its fuel without his participation, watching from 72 floors above Seattle as the world turned his 5-year experiment into content, into think pieces, into morality tales about wealth and character, and the lies people tell themselves about both. Monday morning, Nathaniel brought the newspapers, spread them across Thad's mahogany desk like evidence at trial. Seattle Times, Hidden Heir, Thaddeus Cole's 5-year test of love. Photographs showed him at the groundbreaking, caught mid-profile, Grandmaster chime visible, Addison's small hand in his larger one. The image screamed wealth in ways his diner uniform never could. New York Post went tabloid. Diner hubby dumps gold digger. Turns out he's the gold. Photograph of Victoria leaving Preston's building Sunday morning. No makeup, wearing Friday's gown, looking like someone who'd survived a natural disaster. You're famous. How does that feel? Thad barely glanced at the headlines. Like being dissected in public. I never wanted this. Too late. You're the story of the week. Nathaniel settled into the chair across from him. Victoria's called 73 times. Your personal line, office line, even found my number. Block them all. Already done. Nathaniel paused. But you should know, the paparazzi photos from this weekend are brutal. She looks destroyed. She destroyed herself. Thad signed acquisition documents without reading them properly, muscle memory taking over. I simply existed as truth. Your grandmother used to say the same thing, right before she'd systematically dismantle someone's portfolio. Nathaniel's expression held concern wrapped in professional neutrality. Be careful you don't become her, Thad. Evelyn was brilliant. She was also alone for 20 years after your grandfather died. The words landed heavier than intended. Thad set down his pen, looked at the man who'd been more father than employee since he was 18. You think I'm being cruel. I think you're human. Hurt people, even when they don't mean to. I'm not hurting anyone. Victoria's experiencing natural consequences. In front of 4 million Twitter users, Thad had no response to that. Turned back to his windows, to the city sprawling below, to the ferry cutting white lines across Elliott Bay like scars that would heal and reappear with the tide. His phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. I know you won't answer, but I need you to know I'm sorry. For everything. I was wrong about you, wrong about myself, wrong about what matters. I don't expect forgiveness, just wanted you to hear it from me, not through lawyers. Victoria Thad read it twice, deleted it, felt nothing except tired recognition that apologies couldn't rewrite history. Victoria Sinclair Hastings learned about unemployment the way she'd learned most hard lessons lately, abruptly, publicly, without dignity to cushion the fall. Monday morning, 9:47 a.m. Email from Sterling Development, HR. Effective immediately, your position has been eliminated due to organizational restructuring. Final paycheck will be direct deposited Friday. Please return all company property by 5 p.m. today. 3 sentences. 5 years of law school and bar exam hell reduced to corporate boilerplate. She called Preston. Voicemail. Called again. Voicemail. Texted. Did you know they were firing me? Response came 30 minutes later. My father fired me too. Cascades his project now. I'm moving to Phoenix. Don't contact me again. This is your fault. Victoria stared at the message until the words blurred. Your fault. Your billionaire ex. Your inability to recognize what you had. All true. All irrelevant to the fact that she was unemployed, soon to be homeless. Preston's penthouse was his. She'd moved in without signing anything, and professionally toxic. Nobody wanted the attorney who'd divorced a fortune. She spent Monday applying to firms, sent her resume to Morrison and Whitmore, hoping her former employer would show mercy. Got back. Position filled. Best of luck. Translation, we're embarrassed to have employed you. Tried 6 other corporate firms. 4 didn't respond. 2 sent polite rejections within hours, which almost felt worse. They decided that fast. Tuesday, she moved into a Residence Inn on Capitol Hill. $800 a week she couldn't afford, charging it to credit cards that were approaching their limits, staring at beige walls and wondering how many poor decisions it took to end up here. Her mother called Wednesday. Victoria let it ring 4 times before answering. Sweetheart, how are you holding up? The question was so absurd, Victoria almost laughed. I'm unemployed and living in a hotel, Mother. How do you think I'm holding up? Pause. Caroline regrouping, searching for the right tone. Your father and I want to help. Financially, emotionally, whatever you need. You want to help? You told me to leave him. For 5 years you told me Thaddeus was dead weight, that I deserve better, that I should find someone with ambition. Victoria's voice cracked. You judged him based on his job and his clothes, and I listened because I thought you understood success. We didn't know. Exactly. You didn't know. You assumed. And I assumed. And now I've lost the only person who ever loved me for me, not for what I could become or who I could make them look good with. Victoria swallowed hard. I have to go. Victoria, please. She hung up, turned off her phone, sat in beige silence cataloging every choice that had led here. Every moment she'd valued appearance over substance. Every time she'd chosen comfort over character. Thursday, she found the Legal Aid Society posting. Staff attorney, $48,000 annually, government benefits, helping low-income families fight evictions and predatory landlords. 6 months ago, she would have laughed. Now it looked like redemption. She wrote the cover letter in one sitting. I recently learned that appearances can be deceiving and character matters more than credentials. I spent 5 years married to a man I judged by his paycheck instead of his principles. I'd like to spend the next 5 years helping people who've been underestimated by systems that value wealth over worth. Sent it before doubt could intervene. Then opened her laptop and did what she'd avoided for 5 days. Googled Thaddeus Remington Cole. The results overwhelmed. Forbes profile from 2 years ago, written during his sabbatical, so it didn't mention the disguise, but it detailed Cole Holdings' expansion strategy, Evelyn's legacy, Thad's philosophy of profit with purpose, Wall Street Journal interview about mixed-income housing developments, mentions in Business Insider about his foundation work. Photos were rare. He clearly avoided cameras, but she found a few. Thad at a Manhattan gala, tuxedo and confident smile. Thad at a ribbon cutting in Philadelphia, shaking hands with the mayor. Thad on a panel about affordable housing, gesturing while making a point. Every image showed someone completely settled in his power. Not arrogant, just certain. Someone who'd always known his worth and never needed external validation. Victoria tried reconciling these photos with her memories. Thad in Morrison's apron, hairnet smashing down his sandy blonde hair. Thad riding the number 10 bus in January, breath fogging windows. Thad eating ramen for the fourth night running because they couldn't afford groceries. He'd been this the entire time, chairman while scrubbing floors, billionaire while choosing between bus fare and lunch. She found her answer in that New York Times profile, in a quote from Evelyn Remington Cole. Character isn't built in comfort, it's forged in struggle. Anyone can be generous with inherited wealth. The real test is whether you stay generous when you have nothing. Evelyn had tested Thad by hiding the fortune, despite him having every legal right to it. Thad had tested Victoria the same way. She'd failed. Victoria closed the laptop, lay on scratchy hotel bedspread, wondered if Thad was in his office right now, making decisions worth millions while she couldn't afford next week's rent. Wondered if he thought about her at all. Wondered if she'd ever stop thinking about him. Her phone buzzed. Email from Legal Aid Society. We'd like to schedule an interview. Are you available Monday at 2 p.m.? Small mercy, small hope. She took it. 3 weeks after the groundbreaking, Thad was reviewing Philadelphia acquisition documents when Elizabeth knocked. Sir, Dr. Juliet Ashford Westbrook is here for lunch. Right, he'd forgotten, too focused on financial projections. Give me 5 minutes. He found Juliet in the waiting area, reading the New England Journal of Medicine on her iPad, still in scrubs from morning rounds at Seattle Children's Hospital. 32, dark hair in a professional bun, wedding ring from her late husband still visible despite him dying 3 years ago. They'd met 6 weeks ago at a charity gala. She'd given a speech about pediatric cancer patients that made grown men cry. Afterward, they talked for 2 hours about everything except money. 4 dates since then: coffee, quiet dinner, Pike Place Market, SIFF Cinema. She knew he was wealthy, impossible to miss the Patek Philippe, but she'd grown up in old Connecticut money herself. Understood wealth was context, not content. What she didn't know, because he hadn't told her, was that he was currently internet famous for the Victoria situation. Sorry I'm late. Juliet stood, shook his hand. They weren't at kissing hello stage yet. Emergency surgery ran long. I should apologize for the scrubs. They walked to a quiet French bistro. Midway through lunch, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, froze. Everything okay? My colleague sent me a news article. About you. She looked up, expression carefully neutral. You're the billionaire who worked at a diner to test your wife? Thad's stomach sank. Ex-wife, and yes. That's quite a story. It's been making rounds. I meant to tell you before you found out from tabloids. But it's complicated, Juliet finished. I understand complicated. Thad waited for judgment, questions, the usual response. Instead, Juliet asked, Are you okay? The question caught him off guard. I'm fine. That wasn't convincing. I'm processing. The test ended how I expected. Just wasn't prepared for it to become entertainment. The internet loves a morality tale. Juliet took a sip of water. For what it's worth, I think your ex-wife made a terrible mistake. Everyone thinks that. I mean it differently. I grew up around wealth, saw what it does to people, how it corrupts them, makes them forget what matters. You chose to live without it, to see if someone could love you stripped of trappings. That's brave. Or manipulative. Both can be true. Her smile was gentle. After Michael died, I didn't tell anyone I was dating about him for months. Needed to know they liked me, not the tragic widow narrative. So I understand the impulse to test. Thad hadn't known about her husband. She'd mentioned being widowed once, changed subject when he tried to ask. I'm sorry, that must have been devastating. It was, still is sometimes, but it taught me appearances, what people see versus who they are. Those don't always align. She picked up her fork. Your story's unusual, but I get it. And for the record, I'm not dating you for your money. What are you dating me for? Still figuring that out, but the foundation work and volunteer hours don't hurt. They finished lunch. At Columbia Center's entrance, Juliet paused. Full disclosure, if this continues, we'll need to discuss your ex-wife. Not because I'm jealous, but because your past affects your present. I need to know if you're ready for something new or still processing something old. That's fair, but not today. Today I have surgery and you have meetings about millions. She kissed his cheek. Call me when you're ready for complicated conversations. She left. Thad watched her go, white coat bright against gray afternoon, and felt something unfamiliar. Hope, maybe. Relief that someone saw him as more than a headline. Victoria got 3 offers within 10 days. Legal Aid Society, $48,000 annually. Meaningful work, financial hardship. Harrington Sterling, $150,000 annually. Corporate law, stability. Small firm in Tacoma, $75,000 annually. Compromise position. She sat in her hotel room with all 3 letters spread across the bed. The choice should have been obvious. Take the money, rebuild, move forward. But she kept thinking about Thad at Morrison's Diner, choosing minimum wage over mansions, testing whether character mattered more than comfort. She picked up her phone, called Harrington Sterling. Mr. Sterling, I appreciate the offer, but I'm declining. I've accepted a position at Legal Aid Society. Long pause. That's $48,000 a year. Yes, sir. You're turning down $150 to make $48? I'm choosing work that matters over work that pays. Someone recently taught me that lesson. Time I started applying it. Harrington was quiet. Then, that's unexpectedly principled, Miss Sinclair Hastings. Good luck, and if it doesn't work out, call me. She hung up, feeling lighter than she had in months. Not proud exactly, just aligned. Like she'd finally made a choice based on who she wanted to be instead of who she thought she should become. Legal Aid Society occupied a cramped office in Pioneer Square. Shared desks, coffee that tasted like burnt offerings, clients who couldn't pay, couldn't afford lawyers, couldn't fight systems designed to keep them powerless. It was the hardest work she'd ever done, also the most meaningful. 3 weeks in, she was leaving at 7 p.m., late prepping for an eviction hearing, when she saw the Rolls-Royce Phantom outside. Midnight blue. Impossible to miss. 6 months after the groundbreaking disaster, Cascade Heights Tower was finally happening. Harrington Sterling had restructured everything. New contractors, new timeline, new management team. Cole Holdings maintained its 42% equity stake, provided oversight, collected projected returns. The ribbon cutting was scheduled for a Thursday in September. Columbia Tower Club, again, Harrington believed in symbolic venues. With 300 guests, press coverage, the mayor giving a speech about Seattle's economic vitality. Thad had to attend. 42% ownership meant responsibilities. What he didn't expect was seeing Victoria's name on the guest list. Why is she invited? He asked Nathaniel while reviewing the RSVP spreadsheet. Harrington's gesture of goodwill. She worked on initial legal framework before everything imploded. He's trying to show there are no hard feelings, that everyone's moved forward professionally. Has she RSVP'd? Yes, +1. Someone named Marcus Greenfield. Thad Googled the name. High school history teacher at Roosevelt, drives a Subaru, makes $67,000 a year. published articles about teaching civic engagement to underserved communities. So Victoria was dating someone who actually valued meaningful work over paychecks. Character growth, apparently. I'm bringing Juliet, Thad decided. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. You sure? First time Victoria will see you with someone else. She's bringing someone. I'm bringing someone. We're adults. We can handle it. Thursday arrived with typical Seattle weather. Gray skies threatening rain that wouldn't actually fall. Thad picked up Juliet from the hospital at 5. She'd brought a dress to change into. Emerged from the doctor's lounge looking elegant in navy silk. Nervous? She asked in the Rolls-Royce. Shouldn't be. It's just business. It's never just business when exes are involved. Fair point. Thad adjusted his cufflinks, checked the Grandmaster chime out of habit. What if this is weird? Then it's weird. We survive weird. Juliet took his hand. I'm not threatened by your past, Thad. I'm interested in your future. Big difference. They arrived at 6:30. Press photographers were already stationed, capturing arrivals. Thad and Juliet posed briefly, he'd learned to tolerate it, before heading inside. The Columbia Tower Club had been transformed since the groundbreaking. Less opulent, more professional. Harrington's aesthetic versus Preston's try-hard luxury. 300 guests mingling, champagne flowing, string quartet playing something modern and forgettable. Thad spotted Victoria immediately. Impossible not to. His eyes found her automatically, muscle memory from 6 years of marriage. She wore a simple gray dress, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back. Standing next to a tall man with glasses and a warm smile, both of them looking slightly uncomfortable among the wealth. Their eyes met across the room. 6 months since the groundbreaking. 6 months of headlines and fallout and rebuilding. 6 months of processing hurt and choosing forgiveness over bitterness. Victoria said something to her date, started walking toward Thad. Juliet felt him tense, squeezed his hand. Breathe. You've got this. Victoria stopped 10 feet away. Thad, congratulations on Cascade's success. Victoria, his voice came out steadier than he felt. You look well. So do you. She glanced at Juliet, offered a small smile. I'm Victoria, the ex-wife from the viral story. Juliet laughed, surprised by the directness. Juliet Ashford Westbrook, the current girlfriend who's not intimidated by viral stories. Victoria's smile reached her eyes this time. I like her already. Marcus approached, extended his hand to Thad. Marcus Greenfield, I teach history at Roosevelt. Victoria's told me about you, not the tabloid version, the real story. Which version is that? The one where you're both human, both made mistakes, both trying to be better. Marcus glanced at Victoria with obvious affection. She's been working hard on the better part. Thad found himself liking Marcus, despite expecting not to. I heard about your work at Legal Aid. Harrington mentioned you declined his offer. Turned out I needed to prove something to myself more than I needed the money. Victoria paused. Someone once taught me that character matters more than comfort. Took me a while to understand what that meant. Before Thad could respond, Harrington appeared, pulling him toward the stage. Cole, need you for the investor photos. 5 minutes. Thad glanced at Juliet. She nodded. Go, I'll be fine. He followed Harrington, leaving Juliet and Victoria and Marcus in awkward triangle formation. Juliet broke the silence first. Would you like champagne? I need champagne. Victoria laughed. God, yes. They moved toward the bar, Marcus trailing behind. The bartender poured 3 flutes of something expensive. Juliet raised hers. To complicated histories and uncertain futures, Victoria clinked glasses. And to people brave enough to date someone with complicated histories. Is it weird? Juliet asked. Seeing him with someone else? Victoria considered the question honestly. It's weird, but good weird. He deserves someone who sees him, really sees him. I didn't. Not until it was too late. He talks about you sometimes, about what you taught him. What could I possibly have taught him? That tests are necessary but cruel, that people can change, even when it's too late to matter, that forgiveness is possible but not required. Juliet paused. And that you're trying. The legal aid work, he respects that. I'm trying to deserve the respect. Victoria glanced across the room where Thad was posing for photos, looking comfortable in his power. Take care of him. He deserves someone who doesn't need testing to prove their worth. I will. Juliet meant it. And for what it's worth, I don't see you as competition. I see you as someone who helped shape the man I love. So thank you for that. Victoria's throat tightened. That's generous. It's true. Marcus returned with appetizers. Thad finished with photos, rejoined them. The four stood in uncomfortable square formation, unsure of protocol. Then Victoria extended her hand to Thad. Congratulations on everything you built. I mean that. Thad shook it, felt the finality of the gesture. Congratulations on what you're building. I'm proud of you. Camera flashes captured the handshake. Tomorrow's headline would read, Billionaire and ex-wife show mature closure at Cascade Heights event. The ceremony proceeded. Harrington gave a speech about vision and perseverance. The mayor talked about economic growth. Thad said a few words about mixed-income housing and community investment. Ribbon was cut. Champagne toasts were made. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed, Thad and Juliet walked toward the exit. Victoria and Marcus headed the same direction. They ended up side by side at the coat check. Marcus broke the silence. Well, that was less awkward than I feared. Give it time, Thad replied, then smiled to show he was mostly joking. Juliet elbowed him gently. Be nice. Victoria laughed. The sound was genuine, unforced. We should go. Early client meeting tomorrow. Us too. Surgery at 6 a.m. Juliet took Thad's arm. It was good to meet you both. You too. They walked out together, splitting at the elevator. Thad and Juliet heading to the parking garage, Victoria and Marcus toward the bus stop. In the Rolls-Royce, Juliet studied Thad's profile. You okay? Yeah, I really am. Still love her? Thad thought about it. Honest answer. I love who we both were once, but I'm in love with you. Juliet kissed him. Good answer. At the bus stop, Marcus wrapped his arm around Victoria's shoulders. That was intense. It was necessary. Victoria watched the Rolls-Royce pull away, taillights disappearing into Seattle traffic. I needed to see him happy, needed to know I didn't destroy him. You didn't. People are resilient. Some more than others. The number 10 arrived. They boarded, found seats in back. Victoria leaned against Marcus, feeling settled in ways she hadn't when riding in limousines and wearing borrowed diamonds. Both cars drove opposite directions through the city, both toward new lives, both toward earned peace. 1 year after the groundbreaking disaster, Thad received a package at his office. No return address, but he recognized the Legal Aid Society logo on the label. Inside, a framed certificate. Award for Philanthropic Leadership. $5 million anonymous donation had funded 100 new cases, saved 60 families from evictions, provided legal representation to people who couldn't afford it. At the bottom, handwritten note. Thank you for teaching me what matters. Still learning, but getting better. Thad hung it in his office, not prominently, just present. Reminder that people could change, that tests could be passed after initial failures, that forgiveness was possible even when reconciliation wasn't. He called Juliet. Dinner tonight? I'm on call. Tomorrow? Tomorrow, there's something I want to discuss. Good something or concerning something? Hopeful something, she laughed. Bring wine, I'll bring ears. They hung up. Thad looked out at Seattle, 72 floors below. The city moved through its Thursday routines. Somewhere down there, Victoria was helping a family fight an unjust eviction. Somewhere, Preston was rebuilding his career in Phoenix. Somewhere, Caroline and Harrison Sinclair Hastings were learning that assumptions carried costs. The world kept turning. People kept growing. Some toward each other, some away, all trying to figure out how to be better than yesterday. Thad picked up his phone, texted Victoria for the first time in a year. Certificate arrived. Proud of you. Coffee sometime? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Maybe, in time, still learning to be someone worth having coffee with. You're getting there. So are you. He put down his phone, smiled despite himself. Someday they'd have that coffee. Talk about how they were different people than they'd been. Acknowledge what they'd taught each other. Lessons about character and worth, and the lies people tell themselves about both. Not today, but someday. Because the real test wasn't whether she'd loved him for his money. The real test was whether they could both become people worthy of being loved at all. Bank accounts irrelevant, character the only currency that mattered. Thad was still learning that lesson. So was Victoria. So was everyone who judged too quickly, assumed too much, mistaken appearances for truth. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new choices, new opportunities to be better. For now, that was enough.